Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to Freedom Deals Live. So we're taking a slightly different route this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. So today I'm actually recording it this morning. You're going to see this afternoon because I have a clash. But this is an existing deal of mine. So we're actually about to start construction on this in the next few weeks. But this was actually a very interesting learning curve for me because I encountered a number of things on this deal that I hadn't encountered before. Some of them I was aware of, but just hadn't had to personally deal with it. And then there were some other things in this deal that just were in that world of I didn't know. And you'll discover that in this world of development and anything that you, I guess, try and get really good at is there is always a world of what you don't know. Be open to that. And that's where the true growth or the explosive growth lies. So what we're looking at here is an aerial shot of this particular deal. Now, the owner of this has a very significant parcel of land. So this is the parcel of land here. From memory, it's about 2 hectares. Now you can see all around it, it has largely been developed. And if we zoom right out, you can see there's a lot of developments happened around it. And most of this down to this side here is floodland from memory. So this was a deal that came to me off market. So the agent was one we had a good relationship with, and I'm just going to put my phone on do not disturb. Apologies for that. So we had a good relationship with this agent, and what made this unique as well, or I guess what created the opportunity, was the fact that the way the landowner wanted to do this deal couldn't really be done by just taking this to open market, because he didn't want to sell his whole parcel of land. He wanted access to some money, but he just wanted to sell off enough land to get that amount. So that opened up an opportunity, because it's not like the agent can just easily take that to realestate.com and run a normal sales campaign. It requires a certain skill set. It requires a certain level of knowledge. And so that was what created the opportunity, and the agent brought it to us because he knew us. He had worked with us in the past, and he knew our expertise. So he suggested us. He put us forward. So that straight off the bat was an opportunity. The fact that it wasn't something that was just going to go to the general market. The other thing too was the seller was very motivated because he had a specific need for that money by a certain time, which is great, because if everyone knows the outcome they're looking for and by when, everyone kind of gets into a problem-solving mindset of okay, how do we achieve that? Versus if you've got people that are thinking of selling, but they're not really sure if they want to sell, or they want to sell under certain circumstances, then that can just drag on and sometimes lead to nothing, because there's no clear intention to get the job done and to get the negotiations done. So with this here, the owner had, like I said, a specific amount of money that they wanted by a specific time, and they were willing to give us access to develop roughly, if I draw a line across here, roughly this amount of land here. So this is the boundary. Fence is actually in the wrong spot, but this is the outer boundary on this side. And they're willing to basically take a line across here. Actually, I can draw a line across there. So roughly speaking, they're willing to give us access to that land, this portion here. Now, that may not seem like a large parcel of land, but remember, this main parcel is 2 hectares. So it's actually a considerable amount of land, enough there for a number of lots. And my boundary line is actually definitely off there. It's more like that. One of the conditions was that we were not to take out this house. So this was an original house from the family going way back. So we had to work on that. Now, the obvious solution here, or the obvious sort of approach, is you can see that the development plan has this road coming in here and just dying. So it's obvious that council wants this road to go through, and this road here as well. You presume at some point they want this to go through. So what we started doing, I should say that the land falls. So this up here, this section here is relatively flat. This side here gently falls away. So this is the lower point down here. This is the higher point up here. So that's always a consideration, is legal point of discharge. How are you getting the water out? Because we don't control the land behind it. This is private property. So we went about looking at various design options as to what we could do here. Ultimately, if you want to figure out what you can pay for something, you need to come up with the design, and you need to figure out what it's going to cost to create that design, and then also figure out what can you sell that land for, or that product for, whatever it is you're creating. Those are the kind of the two major pieces of the puzzle. So we are very familiar with the planning scheme in this area. We do a number of developments in this area and with this planning scheme. So it was not something we were unfamiliar with. However, time would prove that we still had plenty to learn. So where we started, let's just go through a few renditions here. Because the unusual part about this is, I mean, general rule is you're trying to get as many lots as you can. Now, that's not always true. Sometimes less is more. Now, as you can see here, we start some basic layouts. Okay, this side here seemed relatively simple, you would think. Now, this side here, a bit more complicated because we've got relatively narrow frontage and really deep land. And if you pay attention to these boundaries here, you've got these blocks here being, because kind of you typically start with the frontage and go, all right, well, what are the minimum frontages allowed in this area? What can we turn that into? Okay, that's kind of what the best guess would be at the time. It's like, okay, well, we can do a couple of 7.5 meter lots. Terrace lots are very popular at the moment. Could do a 10 meter wide lot here. This one, because of the unusual shape, we want it to be a bit wider and a bit bigger. But then you end up with these 7.5 meter lots that are like 40 to 50 meters deep. That's a really unusual lot type. But all right, it's a possibility. It gives us 7 lots. That's one idea. Okay, what's next? Okay, another possibility was to slightly taper this one. So basically trying to make these a little bit more rational. So they were only, I forget what it was, but 30 or 40 meters deep. And then you've just got this one larger lot with a bigger backyard. Okay, makes a bit more sense because with setbacks, the house might be here. They might just do a long low set, and then that opens up to their big backyard. That kind of makes a bit more sense. Not going to say I was in love with it, but makes a bit more sense. Then we had a look at this. Now, this probably made the most sense in that we have a rear access driveway down to an 800 square meter block at the back. These then become very sort of typical block sizes and block shapes. And we've ended up with the same amount of lots. So we've ended up with 7 lots on this plan. But the cost goes up because now we've got a rear allotment. But I would say those blocks are of a better value. The other ones are just a very unusual lot type. Now let's see if we have one more. Yes, we did. So then we had a look over this side here, because the trouble we ran into here was when you actually look at the scheme, they have a rule that terrace lots need to be bookended. And bookended means you got to have 2 small lots and they need to be surrounded by 2 big lots. Or it can be, in some cases, 4 terrace lots, and then they've got to be bookended with 2 bigger lots. And what the argument here was with council, well, they said, well, that's not a bookend because even though it's a bigger lot, it's not yours, it's not part of your development. That doesn't actually make sense, but that was their position. And same here, they're like, no, that's not part of the development. That doesn't count as a bookend. So then we were faced with a situation of having to lose a lot over on this side. And that was kind of what was going to end up happening there. Now, that's already one complication. Now, the end result here was that to get the dollar amount, there's actually more to deal with over here, but we ended up negotiating with the landowner here to give us a little bit more space here. So we could have enough to have a bigger lot and then 2 smaller lots. And effectively using, I forget which side it was, this side or that side as the bookend they came around to. But it still left a question mark over here. Now, at this point, the feasibility was looking pretty healthy. Then we go to the pre-lodgement meeting. And pre-lodgement meetings can be interesting. They can make your life a lot easier, and they can turn a questionable deal into a great deal, and they can also go the other way. They can turn a deal that looks like a common sense deal into no-go. Now, what happened here when we went to the pre-lodgement meeting is it got proven or got shown to us that this was never going to happen. So even though that the landowner was willing to give us all of this land to develop for that agreed amount, the council was not willing to get on board with that idea. And here is why. This is what you call a master plan. So when all of this land was developed around the outside, what council will have a look at is if in certain developments, they will say, all right, well, it's very clear that this area needs to all work together. So even though you're only developing this section here, we need you to create a master plan for the whole lot so that we can see that what you are doing is going to end up functioning with this other land when it's developed. And as another example, one of our recent ones, which was a 2-stage development, we had 2 8,000 square meter parcels. We did not have the next 8,000 square meter parcel, but then we had the one after that. And then on that end was a church, on that end was townhouses. So these 4 were the only 4 left. So when we did it, we needed to create a master plan for all of it, even though we were not developing that middle block. Makes perfect sense, because otherwise you end up with land that just doesn't actually work with everything else around it, and sometimes can mean it's undevelopable. So at the time, though, we weren't aware of this master plan. So this was the master plan submitted by the previous developer. And so actually, I think that's already with a couple of modifications from us. But anyway, so this was the master plan. So this is our dead end street here, and we are looking at continuing that road in here. Now, the issue council had is as you can see, there's one road here. There's also another road here. But basically, you can see that black line there. Actually, I'll see if I can zoom in on that a bit more. So this black line here is the current boundary. And he was wanting to give us all of this land here to develop, including this back section here. But you can see if they allowed us to use this land here now, then basically that would stuff up the streetscape of this street when it is developed in the future. So what they said was, no, your blocks have to align with this master plan. You can only go back as far as here unless you can get some agreement from this neighbor here to extend the road through and all the rest of it. But as you can see, that road there goes over the top of his shed. That's not going to work. So what that left us with was meaning we could not use this back portion of land. We now had less saleable land. So that rear lot situation, no go, and those long lot situation, no go. So on the positive, in terms of the quality of blocks, it makes a lot more sense. But it did kind of hurt the numbers in the sense that we now had less land to develop. So the other things that they brought up too was looking at the distances, the separation distances. So actually, I think this is going back a couple of years when we did this pre-lodgement, but I think we actually provided this this plan here, which was an amendment to the original one, I think. And so then we come into master plan challenges like separation distances from intersections and all those sorts of things. And originally, I think they had a road coming through here or something to that effect. So what we had to do was convince them that, look, it actually made more sense for that to be a pathway, and that our master plan effectively made sense, met the requirements, the adequate separations, and eventually we got them on board with that. Now, I make that sound relatively simple now, but that was actually a lot of back and forth between council, because they need to make sure that they're not putting a nail in their foot for the future. They need to know that this is going to be developable in the future. And good, that's what they're there for. So in the end, we were able to get across the line the intention, but then that created some challenges with the numbers. And that is actually what brought us back to having that negotiation with the landowner to get a bit more land here so that we could squeeze another block out of this and basically get the numbers to work. Now, what's interesting about this is in the first instance with council, they went, no, you cannot have these lots like this because they're not bookended. They're not bookended by anything. That's not your lot. That's not your lot. And then in the end, they actually just accepted the situation because like our argument was, well, this is going to be developed in the future. So you'll have control over what goes here next. They didn't accept that. But then later on, I think we had a second pre-lodgement meeting that we went, well, this actually is part of the development. This is one of the lots. This is the master lot. So we are bookending it. It's bookended here and it's bookended here by this 2-hectare lot, to which they went, I suppose you're right. So just a slight changing of wording, and that changed their perspective. Interesting. So one of the things, I guess, a lesson to take out of that is sometimes there are things that just don't really make sense to us that council does, and it kind of is just part of the deal. But never follow your gut. When your gut tells you, hang on, something doesn't seem right here, or there seems to be a logical solution here that we're missing, don't give up on that idea. Stick with that idea, because often like this, it's just a case of reframing it to have them see that it is actually an appropriate solution. So in the end, we ended up getting across the line 4 lots over here and 3 lots over here. So we got 7 lots. That had the numbers work, which was great. Now, the key thing being here is that's not like enshrined in the planning scheme. Like unless you go looking for that, you don't necessarily know that that is there. So what I'm saying here is that when you are dealing with parcels where it is carving off a parcel of a larger piece, or it's basically you're extending development into a new area, be mindful that these sorts of things will exist, especially when it's an area that has previously not been developed and now it might be all acreages and now they're all getting carved up. They're not letting each person just carve up each acreage however they feel like it. There will be most likely a master plan for the area, which is going to dictate where your roads need to go. That can massively change the value of a property, because in effect, what we talk about with real estate and development is the efficiency of the property makes a huge difference to its value. Because if you've got a road going straight down the middle and lots off either side, that's wonderfully efficient. What's less efficient than that? A road going down one side and only lots coming off one side, because now the cost of that road is divided amongst half the number of lots. What's even better than that again? If you happen to have a road either side of your property, so you need to build no road, and now you can just create lots plugging into that existing road. That's like the dream. So same amount of land, but you can see here how the master plan makes a massive difference in the value of that property. So be aware when you do look at these sorts of developments that makes a massive difference to the profitability and therefore the value of the site when you're purchasing it. You can't just go, oh, that development site over there sold for 2 million and they made profit, so if I pay 2 million for this, I'll make profit. Doesn't work that way. So, pardon me. Actually, that was another challenge with this, stormwater. So what we needed to be clear on here was, remember, land is flowing this way. This is one of the few councils that actually still allows seepage pits. A seepage pit is kind of like just a small retention basin wherever the lowest point is in the block where the water is naturally going to flow. Let's say it's down here. Basically, there's a big pit dug, gravel put into it. It's lined so the water will go into there in a big rain event and then gradually seep out over time instead of it all just rushing onto the neighbor's yard. Because that was another thing was, okay, are they going to accept that, or are we going to have to pipe it? And then is there a stormwater outlet somewhere nearby low enough that we can connect into? In the end, they were okay with the seepage idea. But remembering now we don't have that real lot anyway, it's just these here. So what we're actually doing now is filling these lots to about, well, most of that's getting filled, but basically that will achieve the adequate amount of fall for it to come down this street. So we will have retaining going down here and around here. This will all be filled and then it will drain towards this street. That will be the legal point of discharge. But at the time when we were still trying to get that rear lot, that probably wouldn't have been an adequate solution, because retaining here and filling that thing would have cost a bomb. So not sure that would have worked. All right, let's look at services. So with this one here, because it's right next to a previously developed parcel, it's quite beautiful. We've got water terminating here. We've got sewer terminating here. So literally all we're doing is extending this road in here. I forget how much it is, 60 meters or something. And then extending the sewer and extending the water. It doesn't really get much easier than that when you're building a road. That's quite beautiful. And then, so this was the stormwater piping here. That was, it was earlier on, it was a question as to how we were going to do it. Was this deep enough that we'd be able to pipe it across to here, or could we just do curb and channel here? Well, the answer to do curb and channel was we needed to fill. You're trying to avoid filling where you can. But again, remember, all of this needed to be done in line with the master plan. So that included the engineering, because you can't allow this portion here to be developed at levels that is then not going to line up with the surrounding development when that gets done. So when we did our engineering, we had to consider how will the rest of this be developed, so that one day when it's all developed, you can't tell that it was done at separate times. You don't want one parcel up here and one parcel down here because of the way it was developed separately. Pardon me. So those were really the main ones. Power was underground, so we will continue that underground power through. Now, at the time, I don't know that it shows it in here actually. At the time, there actually was, yes, here we are. So this is us here. Notice these circles. Those are power poles. So that was actually one of the early challenges we had, was that there were power poles on our land, because when all of this was developed, that was done by them supplying power to this property over here through these power poles. They were installed to allow that to be developed. That developer was meant to dispose of those and make this property here underground power. Didn't happen. So that was actually a big question mark, because number one, look, we knew we could get rid of them technically, but we'd have to get agreement from this neighbor here. They weren't friendly to this person here. Turns out that that connection over here was not redundant, but what's the word? Basically, that last pole was rotten and falling apart. So Energex provided them with a notice saying they needed to get to underground power. And then we were able to arrange to have these poles removed. Now, there was a potential that was going to cost us 50, 60 grand. But in the end, I was able to get Energex to recognize them as, what do they call it? Abandoned assets. And they came and removed them at no cost to us, which was a win. So that was, some money straight back to the bottom line, which was great. But so, look, these are all examples of problems you've got to solve. Now, did I know how to get rid of power poles that were abandoned on a property and all the rest of it? No. Why would I have come across that in the past? But it's more a case of, the right people to ask. And it's just a case of you just keep asking the question until you find the answer you need. So like we always say, this is a problem-solving business. Doing development is constant problem-solving. And if you have that mindset of, I'll just keep digging till I find the answer, great. Now, sometimes the answers mean you can't proceed with the development. That's fine. Better to know that before you buy the thing. But then when you do manage to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, which you get better at over time, then you can turn things that were a no-go into a deal. And examples like this, where this was not available to everyone. This was available to us because of our reputation and our ability to solve the problems, to take an out-of-the-box situation and create a solution that worked for the landowner and worked for us and, for the council and the market. So the main takeaway I want you to take from this is, number one, the problem-solving aspect is just, you don't need to know how to solve every problem. You just need to have the willingness to try. And then secondly, be aware that there are these master plans in the background for these newly developed areas. You're not going to have that issue in infill development necessarily, where you're taking a bigger block and carving it into two, splitting down the middle. That's not really going to be very low likelihood of there being a master plan impacting that. But in these areas where you are expanding out, not necessarily greenfield development, but you are expanding into new frontiers, you're converting acreages into higher density stuff, be aware that there typically will be these master plans in the background. All right, guys. Now, obviously, I did do this as a pre-recording, but you can comment on this. So feel free to comment on it, and any questions you've got, I will answer. Obviously, it won't be live, but I'll come back to you on those questions, and you'll get those questions answered. Apologies, I didn't say that at the start. But yes, put all your questions in, and I will come back to you on the comments. Hope that was of value, and I will see you soon.